Across a perilous borderline she passed, where life dips into the subconscious dusk, or struggles from matter into chaos of mind. A swarm with elemental entities and fluttering shapes of vague, half-bodied thought and crude beginnings of incontinent force. At first, a difficult narrowness was there, a press of uncertain powers and drifting wills. For all was there, but nothing in its place. At times an opening came, a door was forced. She crossed through spaces of a secret self and trod in passages of inner time. At last she broke into a form of things, a start of finiteness, a world of sense. But all was still confused, nothing self-found. Soul was not there, but only cries of life. A thronged and clamorous air environed her. A horde of sounds defied significance. A dissonant clash of cries and contrary calls. A mob of visions broke across the sight, a jostled sequence lacking sense and sweet. Feelings pushed through a packed and burdened heart. Each forced its separate, inconsequent way, but cared for nothing but its ego's drive. A rally without key of common will, thought stared at thought and pulled at the taut brain as if to pluck the reason from its seat and cast its corpse into life's wayside drain. So might forgotten lie in nature's mud, abandoned, the slain sentinel of the soul. So could life's power shake from it mind's rule, nature renounce the spirit's government, and the bare elemental energies make of the sense a glory of boundless joy, a splendor of ecstatic anarchy, a revel mighty and mad of utter bliss. This was the sense's instinct, void of soul, or when the soul sleeps, hidden, void of power. But now the vital Godhead wakes within and lifts the life with the supernal's touch. We're reading this way? You? Okay.
Across a perilous borderline she passed, where life dips into the subconscious dusk, or struggles from matter into chaos of mind, as warm with elemental entities and fluttering shapes of vague, half-bodied thought and crude beginnings of inconscient form.
Incontinent.
Incontinent.
So what she's doing is she's crossing over a borderline. He says it's a perilous borderline. It is a dangerous place. And it's the borderline where the life the life level, the conscious life level, meets the dusk, the twilight, or even the shadows of the subconscient, what is not conscious. Or in the opposite direction, life is emerging from matter, struggling up from matter into a chaos of mind, where everything is disordered, a chaos. There's no harmony or order there. And that borderline area, that zone there, she says, is a swarm with elemental entities. Entities, little beings, little individualities. And they are swarming like termites when they fly up on a rainy morning, you know, or they come around the light at night. There's so many of them. The air is thick, a swarm with these elemental energies, these very, very primitive beginnings of individuality emerging in matter from the subconscious. And there are also swarming, fluttering shapes of vague, half-bodied thought. Thoughts that are beginning to form. They haven't really formed themselves into a fixed shape. And there are crude beginnings of incontinent force, of energy, but it's just a crude, unrefined, rough, primitive first beginning of this force which is incontinent. It doesn't have control. It is not controlled. It's just running wild. So it sounds quite dangerous, doesn't it, and unpleasant. This is the borderline where life dips down into the subconscious dusk, the areas that we are not aware of at all, or it's struggling up out of inconscient or subconscious matter towards mind, but in a chaotic way, in a very disordered, uncontrolled way. And then,
at first, a difficult narrowness was there, a press of uncertain powers and drifting wheels. For all was there, but nothing in its place.
so the first experience she has is that it's very narrow. If we go down into this subconscious area of the body, everything is packed very closely. There's this difficult narrowness. And she feels this pressure, a press of these powers and these wills, but they don't know what they want really. They are just pushing and jostling. They are uncertain and drifting. He says, for all was there, everything was there that needed to be, but nothing in its place. It was all confused, chaotic, not where it was supposed to be, no order, no harmony.
At times an opening came, a door was forced. She crossed through spaces of the secret self and trod in passages of inner time.
So here Sri Aurobindo lets us know that all this is taking some time. This doesn't happen just like that. So in that longer time, sometimes, at times, now and then, there's an opening and she can move forward. She's able to force her way through a door. And then she can cross through spaces, open spaces of a secret self. And she could move, walk, tread in passages of inner time. Probably the experience of time is very different when we go into these inner levels. Sergei.
At last she broke into the form of things, the start of finiteness, the world of sense, but all was still confused, nothing self-found.
One more line.
Soul was not there, but only cries of life.
Yes. So after this has been going on for some time, at last she can break through into a place where there is some form and shape and order, a start of finiteness. There's the infinite, which is formless. There's the finite, which is limited, and in the finite there are forms which are more or less fixed. Of course, these forms are not permanent, very far from eternal, but still they last for some time. So she arrives at a place where beginning of fixed forms, fairly stable forms, begins. And there she enters into a world of sense. Even very, very primitive life forms can sense things. No? They can sense that there is light in this direction and dark in that direction, and they can then respond and choose which way to go, or that this water that they're in is more salty in that direction and less salty in this direction, and they can choose which way to go. No? So that's so even with very, very tiny primitive life forms. No? So she enters into this world of sense. It's a life reaction to the touch of things. It doesn't exist in pure matter. It may be there latent, but in matter, Sri Aurobindo says things are managed differently. The senses, it's a manifestation of life. But everything there in that world of sense was still confused. Nothing was self-found. Nothing there knew what it was or where it should be. And soul was not there. There seemed to be no presence of soul there. Only cries of life. So this is a very, I don't know whether Mother would say the most material vital, perhaps something like that. Tatiana.
A prompt and glamorous air environed her. A whole sounds with lights existence, a dissonant clash of cries and contrary calls. A mob of visions broke across the sight. A jostle of peace, lacking sense, ensued. Feelings pushed through a packed and burdened heart. Each force is separate, inconsequent way, but cared for nothing, but its ego's right.
Yes. So thronged, this again gives the idea of it's very packed. A throng is a crowd, a lot of people, or you can have a throng of feelings when you've got a lot of mixed feelings at the same time. So she's surrounded by an atmosphere which is packed by all these elemental entities. And it's clamorous, there's some noise going on. All these entities are trying to assert themselves and pushing and jostling, and that is making some kind of a sound, a clamor, a noise. There's a lot of different sounds, but they defied significance. There are so many of them, you can't tell whether any of them mean anything or not. Significance is meaning. There's a dissonant clash of cries and contrary calls. Dissonant, it's the very opposite of harmony, dissonance. When the sounds come at the same time and they clash with each other, they are not in harmony, they are very discordant. So there are cries and there are contrary calls, this direction, that direction, the other way. All these things here are confused and clashing and conflicting. So that is the sounds, but also she finds that visions are passing in front of her eyes in a mob. A mob is a crowd run wild, rushing around angrily, maybe rushing in different directions. So this mob of uncontrolled visions broke upon her sight. A jostled sequence. So they're following one after the other, but each one is pushing the ones next to it. Jostling is when you try to make room for yourself in a crowd with your elbows, to jostle and push and try to make room for yourself. That's what they are doing. So this mob of visions following one after the other, but it doesn't, that sequence, that succession, doesn't have any sense, and there's no connection between one and the next. Sweet is when we have one thing and then the next thing and the next thing, and there's some kind of order. But here there is no order. And feelings also, they come in a jostled sequence, one after the other, pushing through the heart, which feels too full, packed and burdened. It's so confusing, it's difficult to bear. And each of those feelings and those sounds and those visions is forcing its own way, separate way, inconsequent. Also this way that they push themselves through, it also is not, it's not in any kind of orderly sequence. They push this way and that way and the other way in a very confused manner. No? The only thing they are concerned about is each of those little beings is the drive of its ego. It's not in any way caring about anything that is around it. It's just pushing its own way. So we can see that the ego is starting to manifest itself at this level, right down in the molecules and the single-celled creatures and the cells of our bodies. Leila.
Eerily, without key of common will, thought stared at thought and pulled at the taut brain, as if to pluck the reason from its seat, and cast its corpse into life's wayside drain. So might forgotten lie in nature's mud, abandoned the slain sentinel of the soul.
Thank you. So a rally is when a lot of people gather. No? Yes. But usually a rally should have a purpose. But in this case, there's no purpose. They don't have any key of common will that has brought them all together. They've just all come together. They are thoughts. And each of these thoughts is staring at the other thought, staring angrily. No? And each of them is pulling at the brain, the physical brain. Each of these thoughts is tugging away. I don't know, if you are very confused and upset, you might experience something like this going on inside your head. The brain is tight. It's not relaxed and easy. It feels very tense. And it's as if there's contending thoughts. They want to pull the reason from its seat. The reason has a kind of ruling place in our mind. No? But it's as if now these things coming up from the subconscious, they want to dislodge the reason. Even to kill it. They want to cast its corpse, its dead body, into the wayside drain of life. They want to really displace the reason. If they succeeded, the reason is the sentinel. It is the guardian. It keeps watch on behalf of the soul to protect it. No? If the sentinel is slain and it lies dead and forgotten in the mud of nature, no? It's as if that's what all these swarming things are wanting to do. Joel.
So could life's power shake from it mind's rule? Nature renounce the spirit's government, and the bare elemental energies make of the sense a glory of boundless joy, a splendor of ecstatic anarchy, a revel mighty and mad of utter bliss.
So if they can dislodge the reason, no, then the life can shake off it the rule of the mind. It can just go its own way. No? Nature can renounce, throw away the spirit's government. The spirit is governing the nature through the mind, and especially through the reason. But if they manage to kill the reason, dislodge it, then all these entities, these bare elemental entities that are swarming there on the borderlines of the subconscious, then they would have fun. This is what they think. No? They would make of the senses, the sense experiences, a glory of boundless joy. They would be free, they would enjoy themselves. No? They would enjoy this splendor. It would be so marvelous, this endless anarchy. Anarchy is a state where there's no ruler, no government. There would be a party, a revel, mighty and mad, a really mad, uncontrolled, crazy celebration of utter bliss, of nothing but bliss. That's what they think or feel. They don't think it. That is their instinct. Who's sitting at the back? What do you read, please? Yeah.
This was the sense instead void of soul, or when the soul sleeps hidden void of color. But now the
Vital.
vital God wakes within and lifts the light with the supernal touch.
So he tells us when this happens, it's the instinct of the sense, when there's no influence of the soul, when the sense is void of soul, or when the soul is sleeping and has no power. No? That's one condition. There must be no soul, otherwise the soul would stop this. No? And what the other thing that happens is that the vital Godhead, the powerful divine life force wakes up within and lifts up the individual life force with the touch of the Supreme, which is very, very powerful. So the life alone then is trying to express itself. There's no mind to control it, no soul to control it. The senses just want to have their own way, enjoy themselves. Venkat.
But out shall come the glory and the flame, if mind is cast away into the abyss. For body without mind has not the light. The rapture of spirit spends the joy of life. All then becomes subconscient, tenebrous, inconscience puts its seal on nature's stage, or else a mad disorder wilds the brain, posting along a ravaged nature's roads, a chaos of disordered impulses in which no light can come, no joy, no peace.
Yes. So the senses have this instinct to get rid of the mind, no? But they think then they will be free and they will enjoy utter bliss. But how shall the higher glory and the flame of delight come if mind is thrown away? No? Body without mind doesn't have the light, the consciousness. It doesn't have the delight of the spirit sense. It doesn't have the joy of life. If mind is cast away, all the experiences become subconscious. There's no awareness. They become shadowy, tenebrous. It means shadowy. Inconscience, unconsciousness puts its seal on nature's page, so that they just become inert. There's no consciousness. Or else the brain just gets disordered. A mad disorder whirls the brain, posting along a ravaged nature's roads. Nowadays we send the post by airmail, but there was a time when it had to go with a messenger on horseback or in a carriage. No? And when they drove the horses very, very fast, that's posting, driving along. They want to deliver the mail as quickly as possible, so they would go as fast as possible. So posting along the roads of a ravaged nature, nature would be ruined and spoiled by all this disorder. No? Because there's this chaos of disordered impulses, all pushing their own way. And in that state, no light can come, no consciousness, no awareness, no joy, no peace. It's a terrible state, actually. Right? Mahalingam.
This state now threatened, this pushed from her, as if in a long, endless, tossing stream, one driven with a trampling, hurrying crowd. Hour after hour, she trod in the trees, holding by her will the senseless youth at bay.
Let's pause there.
Out of the
Let's pause there. Yeah. So she feels this state of mad disorder threatening her. She can feel that the brain is under strain, that there's something can really go wrong, no? And she pushes it from her. So she's pushing it on away from her, but still she's being carried along by this crowd. If there's a mad crowd and you happen to be caught in it, you better not try to stop, you will be trampled. So you just have to go with it, no? And it goes on for a long time, as if she's in a long street, an endless street, and it's tossing with these pushing figures. She's driven in the midst of a hurrying crowd who are trampling things. If you stop, you will be trampled, they will trample you with their feet. And all she can do is to hold with her will this senseless mute at bay. It's a French word, and it means a pack of hounds, of hunting dogs, I think. Yes, am I right, Joel? Yeah?
You see that for wolves also?
For wolves, a pack.
Pack of wolves.
Yes. So she's being carried along by this pack. No? And she just has to keep her individuality, separateness, with her will. Lady at the back.
Out of the dreadful press she dragged her will, and fixed her thought upon the Saviour name. Then all grew still and empty. She was free.
You can read the next line also.
A large deliverance came, a vast calm space.
Yes. So finally she's able to drag her will out of that dreadful pressing crowd, and she concentrates on the Saviour name, the divine name. This is a very, very effective thing to do if you are in a kind of desperate situation. You can just repeat the Saviour name, whatever it is for you. And then everything calms down. Everything grew still and empty. She's free. She's no longer being driven along by that crowd. So she has this feeling of deliverance, of being liberated. And the sense of all around her a vast, calm space. Ganga Lakshmi.
For a while she moved through a blank tranquility of naked light from invisible sun, a void that was a bodiless happiness, a blissful vacuum of the nameless peace.
So a while, for a time, She moved through this blank tranquility, quietness, peace. And it's blank. There's no forms or shapes or presences. It's kind of empty. A blank page has nothing written on it. And this is a state of naked light. But that light is coming from a sun which can't be seen. She doesn't see the source of the light. But there's a light that's not clouded, it's naked. There's an emptiness that was a bodiless happiness, the happiness of being released and free and at peace, a blissful vacuum of nameless peace. A vacuum is where there's nothing, no atmosphere, anything. A complete, but this sense of bliss and of peace, such a relief after that terrible experience. Renana.
Now, mightier, dangerous from draw near, the press of worldly mind and inconscious
Brood.
of endless thoughts and will had
Fallen.
from her.
Yes. So he says now there's an even greater danger approaching. Its front drew near. She's got free from this press of the bodily mind and this brood of the inconscient. The brood is the children. The hen has her brood of chickens. Somebody has a lot of children. We may say, oh, her brood, her many children. So this brood of the inconscient is all those aimless thoughts and aimless will. That has all fallen away from her and left her in this state of bliss and peace. But there's something approaching, Berbel.
Approaching loomed the giant head of light, ungoverned by mind or soul, subconscious, vast.
You can read the next two lines also.
Forced all power into a single right, and made his power the might of dangerous seas.
So there's this giant head of life. It looms, it's much bigger than she is. It's higher and like a dark shadow, a dark cloud, or the shadow of a mountain. And that giant head of life is ungoverned by the mind or the soul. It is subconscious. It is vast. It throws, to toss, to throw carelessly all power into a single drive. So it's tremendously powerful, although disorganized. It made its power a might of dangerous seas, like a stormy sea when there's a cyclone or a tsunami coming. All that power comes rushing at her. Suresh.
Into the stillness of her silent self, into the witness of its hues of space, has sped a torrent of the spirit of life, broke like a wind, lashed, trailed, mope of words.
Waves.
Racing on a
Pale.
floor of summer sand. It drowned its banks a mountain of climbing waves.
Yes. So it comes like a flood. right into the stillness of Savitri's silent self, into the whiteness, the purity, silence of her muse of space, that sense of calm, blissful space, comes a flood, a river in flood, a spate. It's when there's been a lot of rain or the snow melts and the river is absolutely swollen and rushing very, very quickly, a torrent. This is the speed of life rushing, and it comes very suddenly, that there hasn't been anything. It broke like a wind-lashed, driven mob of waves. We have that word mob again, or an uncontrolled crowd of waves, driven by the wind to go faster and faster. And that's racing along very fast on this bed of pale summer sand, that peaceful, smooth summer sand. The water is just rushing over it and drowning its banks. It's such a powerful, enormous flood. The river breaks its banks, and the flood rushes down like a mountain of climbing waves. I suppose if a dam breaks, you get some experience like this. Suddenly a tremendous rush of water comes, and that is very dangerous. You read.
Enormous was its vast and passionate voice. It cried to her listening
Spirit.
as it ran,
Demanding.
God's permission to chainless force.
We'll pause there.
Yes.
We'll stop there. So, the voice of this flood is enormous. It's huge, vast and passionate. Such a loud roar. And as it's running, it's crying out. Her listening spirit hears it, shouting. What it wants is that God, the divine, shall submit to uncontrolled force, just to allow force to go as it wishes without any restraint or government at all. It wants to overpower the divine, this force, life force. Dhanalakshmi.
Yet that force calling to the state is done. 1,000 voices in a muted blast. It climbed to the heart's support for its clutch at God, for its need to act, the witness soul's consent, for its lust of power, her neutral beings see.
Yes. So this force is deaf. It won't listen to or hear anybody. And it's calling to a static self which does not respond. But it has voices. It has 1,000 voices in this vastness. What it is claiming, it wants the heart to agree to its clutch. It wants to hold on to joy, and it wants the heart to accept and support it. It claims, it asks from the witness spirit the consent to its need to act. It should be allowed to act freely. And it asks her, Savitri's being, to give its seal of approval to that lust for power, which is there in that tremendous flood of life force.
Muted what?
Yes.
Silence what?
Muted means silenced. I don't know. Oh, I think it's the vast. This is God's vast. There's no response coming from that dumb status. No. So this is the way Sri Aurobindo uses this imagery from, well, we can imagine these things of a great flood or a crowd. These are things that we know, to give us a sense of that inner experience which Savitri is having, feeling attacked and driven, and then this great flood coming at her. These are psychological experiences which she has when she penetrates into these subconscious areas of the being. So we'll stop there today. Across a perilous borderline she passed, where life dips into the subconscious dusk, or struggles from matter into chaos of mind. A swarm with elemental entities and fluttering shapes of vague, half-bodied thought and crude beginnings of incontinent force. At first, a difficult narrowness was there, a press of uncertain powers and drifting wills. For all was there, but nothing in its place. At times an opening came, a door was forced. She crossed through spaces of a secret self and trod in passages of inner time. At last she broke into a form of things, a start of finiteness, a world of sense, but all was still confused, nothing self-found. Soul was not there, but only cries of life. A thronged and clamorous air environed her. A horde of sounds defied significance, a dissonant clash of cries and contrary calls. A mob of visions broke across the sight, a jostled sequence lacking sense and sweet. Feelings pushed through a packed and burdened heart. Each forced its separate, inconsequent way, but cared for nothing but its ego's drive. A rally without key of common will, thought stared at thought and pulled at the taut brain as if to pluck the reason from its seat and cast its corpse into life's wayside drain. So might forgotten lie in nature's mud, abandoned, the slain sentinel of the soul. So could life's power shake from it mind's rule, nature renounce the spirit's government, and the bare elemental energies make of the sense a glory of boundless joy, a splendor of ecstatic anarchy, a revel mighty and mad of utter bliss. This was the senses' instinct, void of soul, or when the soul sleeps hidden, void of power, but now the vital Godhead wakes within and lifts the life with the supernal's touch. But how shall come the glory and the flame if mind is cast away into the abyss? For body without mind has not the light, the rapture of spirit sense, the joy of life. All then becomes subconscient, tenebrous. Inconscience puts its seal on nature's page, or else a mad disorder whirls the brain, posting along a ravaged nature's roads, a chaos of disordered impulses in which no light can come, no joy, no peace. This state now threatened, this she pushed from her, as if in a long, endless, tossing street, one driven mid a trampling, hurrying crowd. Hour after hour she trod without release, holding by her will the senseless mute at bay. Out of the dreadful press she dragged her will, and fixed her thought upon the Saviour name. Then all grew still and empty. She was free. A large deliverance came, a vast calm space. A while she moved through a blank tranquillity of naked light from an invisible sun, a void that was a bodiless happiness, a blissful vacuum of nameless peace. But now a mightier danger's front drew near. The press of bodily mind, the inconscience brood of aimless thought and will had fallen from her. Approaching loomed a giant head of life, ungoverned by mind or soul, subconscient, vast. It tossed all power into a single drive. It made its power a might of dangerous seas. Into the stillness of her silent self, into the whiteness of its muse of space, a spate, a torrent of the speed of life, broke like a wind-lashed, driven mob of waves, racing on a pale floor of summer sand. It drowned its banks, a mountain of climbing waves. Enormous was its vast and passionate voice. It cried to her listening spirit as it ran, demanding God's submission to chainless force. A deaf force calling to a status dumb, 1,000 voices in a muted vast. It claimed the heart's support for its clutch at joy, for its need to act, the witness soul's consent, for its lust of power, her neutral being's seal.